I gave up on all the do-it-yourself plating suggestions on YouTube. They just don't work, and especially if you're going to do some fairly large objects. So I went ahead and bought the Caswell flash copper slash copy chrome 4.5 gallon version, because I do have some larger items that I want to try to plate. Even on the inside of the car, there are some components on the dashboard and all that are fairly large, and so I wanted to have the 4.5 gallon tanks. And I've been working now for a week or two just getting everything I need and getting it set up. So I cleared off a couple of these little plastic tables that I've had radios and stuff on, and yeah, I'm going to dedicate these two tables to my plating operation. I've got my power supply up here. Got to build a little shelf for it. And I've got my buckets set. And I'm going kind of slow, following the directions as best I can. So this is the first bucket I've actually set up, and it's got that SP degreaser in it. And over to the left, I bought some Lowe's buckets. I've got plenty of buckets, but I wanted something that never had grease or dirt in it, and so bought me some Lowe's buckets. That'll be my dipping, cleaning. When you after you put it in the SP cleaner, pull it out and dip it in that clear distilled water to clean it off. And then here, this bucket will be my flash copper tank, and to the right of it is another dipping tank to dip it and cleanse it. Underneath, I set up just went and got me a cheap bathroom fan, put it under that table, run it out the wall. Supposedly all of these chemicals that you used in this system are not caustic. Vapors won't hurt you. The SP cleaner, I don't think is supposed to hurt you, but it might stink. So anyway, I've got me a little fan under there to draw the fumes out. So that's my flash copper tank, my flash copper cleaning tank, and this will be my copper chrome tank and the cleaning tank. I put them down the floor for several reasons. I don't know that these little plastic tables would hold all that weight, and I need the tables for junk and places to lay the items after they've been plated and dry them off, etc. Right now all the other chemicals for all the other processes are up here. I've got there's a tank of copper that I was using to try to copper plate some objects earlier, and it actually works. And I may, after I have done the flash copper on some sample items here, I may try that and see how that works once you've got a flash copper. Because most everything I'm doing is pot metal, and it's Chrysler pot metal, and I've read in some of the forums that the Chrysler stuff is the worst in the world. I don't know why, but anyway, I've got some, I think I described these earlier, but this is a handle that, as you can see, is very, very pitted, and I have sandblasted it, and I actually tried to plate it. You can see that dark area there, so this needs to be sandblasted again, but that's a sample item. Here's another one that I left in muriatic acid just to see what would happen, and you can see it eat it up. And then on the end here, some of that aluminum. This is not muggy weld. This is just plain some kind of aluminum filler that I was practicing with, and I'm going to leave that on and see if it'll plate. Some of the knobs still got nickel on it, so it'll be a good test piece to see what happens in flash copper. This handle here is actually a usable handle. It's got some pitting, and the top of it here, that center, had some real deep pits in it, and I muggy weld those, and so I'm anxious to see how they plate. But they've been laying here for a while, and they'll have to be sandblasted again. And actually, let me show you this piece. This is actually the housing of a backup light off of this 55 Chrysler, and you can see it's pitted terribly, and it's got to be sandblasted again. Also, some of the pits, see that little black spot in that pit there? That's got to be drilled out. Anywhere you see those little black cores, they have to be drilled out. So I got some work to do on this one, and this is not going to be done first because I hope to use this item in the past. I did, there was some real bad pits up on the top of this on the inside, and I muggy weld those just to see how it turns out. And so I got to re-sandblast that, drill out some black spots, and after I practice on some items, and hopefully I can get this pot metal to take flash copper, that might be one of the first items I try to do. So that's where I'm standing. Oh yeah, I bought 2 of these heaters. So this cleaner here, they recommend 190 degrees. So you got to have a hefty heater to get that up to 190 degrees. And then the copy chrome is what, 110, I think, something like. Anyway, these are big heavy-duty cleaners or heaters, and they are very expensive. So I bought 2. One for this degreasing tank and one for copy chrome. And flash copper, maybe I can share one of them back and forth. I'll just have to see. I hope it, as long as I clean it before I put it in the other tank, it ought to be okay. But these are very expensive. And so I've got all of that. And as I said, I'm just taking it one step at a time. I'm getting this degreaser. Oh, the other thing I'm going to have to do, it's already apparent. They tell you in the instructions for these heaters, these things, when they're at full force, are drawing 16 amps. So they say make sure you got a dedicated line for each one of them. So the first thing I did was, I've got these little cheap power strips. I plugged it into that, and it didn't last long at all. The little circuit breaker inside this power strip kicked pretty quick. I don't know what it's set for as far as amperage is concerned, but so I took it down and plugged it in the actual wall outlet, and so far it's held for a pretty good while. But it looks like I'm going to have to run some dedicated lines over here. What I think I'd like to do is run a 220 line over here with a 30 amp circuit breaker. Each line would, each side of it would be 30 amps, and do that because it's going to take some hefty current to operate this, keep the temperatures where they say they ought to be. This one right now, it's operating, and it's set for 190 degrees, which is what they represent. Actually, they say 190 to 240. So it takes a lot of current to get that up to temperature, but I've got it set for 190. And I'm just testing just to see how it does. Will that 20 amp circuit handle it? without kicking out. And so I'm experimenting, and we'll keep you posted as we go along. A little progress report on setting up this Caswell plating system. I will say this, and this is by no means against Caswell. When you buy these kits, just understand that there's more expense to getting them set up. For instance, these heaters that are required. Now these are really commercial type heaters, and they do cost more. There are some fish tank heaters that would probably do just as well. In fact, I've got a couple of them, and I plan to use one maybe on copy chrome, because it will go high enough in temperature. And I'll just to see how well it's regulated, whether it'll keep the temperature in the right range as it should. But first thing I had to do, these heaters, especially these things draw about 16 amps. I think they're 1500 watt, maybe higher, and I know they draw about 16 amps a piece. I actually tried it on a 20 amp circuit, one of these little cheap power strips, and it didn't take it long to pop the little circuit breaker in the power strip. So I plugged it in the 20 amp AC circuit outlets, and it did hold, and it heated the water to 190 degrees. But it was obvious to me that 20 amp circuit and a single 20 amp circuit was not going to allow me to run two of these things at one time. So I ran me two 30 amp. I had an old line that went to a cooking range down here in the basement and wasn't being used, so I separated it into two 110 volt lines, and it's got a 30 amp breaker. So this is a 30 amp circuit on one arm of the 230 volt, and this one over here is on the other arm. So I got two 30 amp circuits here now that I can run these heaters off of. I've still got my ones that are plugged into 20 amp wall outlets, and I can use them to run this power supply and the little agitators that go in the bucket to keep the bubbles flowing. So I think I'm set there now. The only one of these that I have actually filled is this SP cleaner, and that's the one I actually plugged the heater into it, and it heated it to 190 degrees. That seems to be working just fine. Over here is the cleaning bucket where you can clean everything that's been dipped into this degreaser. Clean it before you dump it into another plating tank of some kind. So that's all that's been filled, is the degreaser and its cleaning tub. Quite frankly, I'm having a hard time getting distilled water. I bought out Walmart, and it's been about like 3 weeks and they still haven't replenished their stock. So I did get a few at Food Line, and I'm going to go back and see if I can't get some. I need a lot more distilled water to get all these tanks filled. So that's what's holding me up here now. In the meantime, I made me 3 of these bars here to these go on top of the tanks, and see if I can get a decent picture. They just sit right there on top of the tank. It's nothing in the world, but this is actually 3/4 inch copper pipe, flattened on the ends, bent over so it just sits right down on there, and that flat surface right there sits right nice on top of that bucket. I did put a cheap metal screw in it to clip my lead onto, and this is used to hang the object that you're plating, and then of course there's one used to hang the object in this cleaner. The cleaner doesn't require any heat, any voltage there. You're not doing any plating there, but anyway, I made 3 of them. I've got 3 of those made. And over here I made me a little output, I guess you'd call it, panel. What I've got here is 2 outlets for the DC voltage. One will go to the copper, flash copper, and the other will go to the copy chrome. And this right here is I can plug my meter into it and check the current flow. This big old power supply is okay, and I'm sure it'll do the job, but the amperage on it, you bet the smallest marking on it is 1 amp. So when you need to measure these really low 30 milliamp, 60 milliamp, that kind of thing, you can't read it. But here I can plug in my handy dandy high quality Harbor Freight meter, which has a 200 milliamp capability. You can read 200 milliamps with it, and I can plug that in there and set my current. And then if I'm not using it, I got a little jumper here. I can jumper it out, and that'll apply the voltage to these outlets. So anyway, everything is set up here and ready to go. I just need more water, and then I've got to take some of these test pieces that I have and take them down and sandblast them again, because I'm sure there's a lot of corrosion on them if they've been sitting here a couple of weeks. So I've got to re-blast those and bring them up and start testing plating. I won't do this one first because this is a backup light housing off of that car, and I intend to use this, but it's one of the most pitted items I've got, so I'm anxious to see how much filling I can do with flash copper. And I'm going to probably have to, I don't know whether it's going to do any filling or enough filling or not. I may end up having to muggy weld this entire thing, and if I do, I'm going to probably have to get some of that putty they sell, because this is a round surface, and if you get one area filled and you try to go on to the next area, it's just going to melt and run the other one. And anyway, this is going to be a real challenge to see if we can get this. And one interesting thing, I spilled a little bit of copper solution on this thing, and you can see it actually stuck to an area here. So I've seen where you can actually do some plating without any voltage, and this kind of demonstrates that, because the copper out of that solution adhered to this with no heat, no voltage, no nothing. But anyway, this is going to be totally re-sandblasted, and there are a few of these pits, like right there is one that's got to be drilled out. That black core got to be drilled out. There's another one. There's a few there. A lot of work to get this on. As somebody said, or maybe it's in the Caswell manual, after you do a little bit of this, you understand why these people charge so much to re-chrome pot metal, especially, because it's a lot of work, a lot of time to do it. And so I'm anxious to get started and see if it really works. I have read all the Caswell forums, and in a way it's not good to read them, I guess, because people seem to have a lot of problems, especially with pot metal. And so it's not guaranteed to just, I've tried to follow the instructions to the T. And it's no guarantee though. And I also read in one of the forums where a guy said that the Chrysler pot metal was the worst of all. And this is all Chrysler, 1955 Chrysler. So we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. And but the other thing they tell you is keep trying and keep notes on what you did, and you'll figure out what you did wrong and what you can do to solve the problem. So I hope I can get through that phase pretty quickly here, because I got a lot of stuff I've got to do. And I got right much money tied up in this, but I think nothing compared to what it cost me to get a plater to re-chrome everything on this car. It's probably several hundred items when you count all the little pieces, like these little handles, knobs right here that go on the heater control. I mean, the car is just loaded with small stuff like that that's got to be plated. The base of the windshield wipers, you know, just little stuff like that all over the car that's got to be plated. The window frames, some of it's stainless, but a lot of it's just steel, plated steel and pot metal. So as I said, once again, I'm pretty much set here now, and all I need is distilled water.